One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio show and you start saying incondescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way on the people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire. All right, we are back. Feet to the Fire. Feet to the Fire Radio. I am your host, James Arthur-Yanchek, the Black Knight of talk radio. Now into year, 17? Getting close to the January 5th, which will make it year 18, starting year 18. We're continuing in, I don't know what you want to call it, series? I don't know. I just started doing this thing, and I titled it Fathoming the Unfathomable, Bringing Eternal Principles into Space-Time. And I spent last week, if you want to look at the show, explaining about all that, and laid a lot of groundwork for examples, givens, if you will, that I use in my search. And as the givens have been, over the years, have been built on experience and following things. So if you're picking this show up, you might want to go back to the other one, just to see, kind of see what's going on that. I'm not going to repeat things each week. I'm going to try and keep this in an hour or less. But it's going to be what it's going to be, that is. I'm calling it kind of an on-the-fly series where I'm winging it. Winging it meaning, what am I going to talk about? And I get ideas, and I follow the ideas, and I get hunches, and I follow the hunches. The hunches I'm calling would be the what would it be? The realistic personification of prophecy. That is, I think when you have a gift of prophecy or you ask God for truth, because prophecy is a tendency to try and find truth or be attracted to it. And likewise, the opposite, which is to be attracted to expose BS. Two of those things, which I do. So I, You'll be the judge whether or not what I do is worth anything to you. But so I was thinking what to do this week, and I thought of the word mammon in the Bible, and a lot of stuff started flowing. I got ideas here and there. Some things I want to talk about. So that's how it got going. The biblical word mammon has been on my mind. What does it mean? Why do some translators transliterate the word rather than translate the word? And, of course, most important, how does it apply to us? Because the actual words in the Bible, some of them are, I'll get into it. I'm getting ahead of myself. I should follow my little list here or I'll lose something. Perhaps we should first define translation, transliteration, and paraphrase. And then look why Greek, Latin, and English translators decide to keep some original language words in their translations. First, a translation is, according to Oxford Dictionary, a written or spoken rendering of the meaning of a word, speech, book, or other text in another language. You are translating, rendering. I guess you're going from Greek to English, for example. And transliteration is to write or print a letter or word using the closest corresponding letters of a different alphabet or script. So if you want to, like the Greek word photo, we didn't translate it into light, which is what it means. For whatever reason, the people who put together the English language decided to keep the word photo, and it now means like a picture, but the Greek word means light. So they transliterated it into English. Instead of saying like light, they transliterated it into photo, PH, which is the Greek F, if you will, OTO. And so now we see the word photo, and if you look up the Greek word in Greek, it will say photo, only it'll be in Greek letters. So that is transliteration. A paraphrase now is when you express the meaning of the writer, speaker, or something written or spoken using different words, especially to achieve greater clarity. So that's when, instead of taking the word, say you were going to say, a man went out fishing and he caught 2 fishes and he did whatever story it would be. Instead of using fishing, which was a common work, a common employment at the time, and people would understand it, you might say, guy was in the office one day and he went out to make a copy, but you would still tell the same purpose. You're just putting it in different context. They don't call that translation because you're now using words that weren't there, but theoretically anyway, the point is still made. So those are the 3 items. And in layman's terms, I just kind of said all that. Well, I'll read it just to make sure I got all the points that I put down there. In layman's terms, a translation is conveying the words into another language, which is preferred. A paraphrase is conveying the meanings into another culture. Now, there's a risk of misunderstanding the original meaning and altering it, intentionally or otherwise. And a transliteration is introducing the words themselves into a different language or culture. And that's good, provided you research the newly created word. So if you don't know what the word means, and you're like, like mammon, what is it? Well, you're not going to get it in the English reading. So you'll have to go back and find out what it was and then try to figure out why did they bother to keep it rather than, because to me, that's part of the reason. When they said these things originally, there's a point. And as people translated and conveyed it forward, sometimes they may have added some commentary, harmless, provided they got the job right. That's where paraphrasing comes in. Sometimes, when you say things like, let the reader beware, or let the reader understand, is that the original quote, or is that the guy copying it? Who knows? I mean, it doesn't matter, so it doesn't really matter. So that is what, where you have the 3 things: transliteration, creating a new word; translation, using existing words in the other language to try and convey it. And sometimes you can't do all of it. For example, the Greek word for love, that English word love, right? In Greek word, there's several words. Agape being the sacrificial love, like would be a father or a mother to a kid. I don't mean sacrificing them, but you're giving up things for their best at costing to you, or at least you're not getting. And then you have phileo, which is where you get Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. Phileo is like a brotherly love. And then you have eros, which is erotic love. But, in English you have, love. And so sometimes when you translate into the words, you have to then still go back and find the original words to get a greater understanding of what it means. Because in the translated language, you're going to have missed some of it. That's why you hear that phrase, things were lost in the translation. Well, there you go. the languages spoke in the Bible, common languages in biblical Mideast in the day, was Aramaic. It was around forever. It was the ordinary person-to-person language. Greek was more of an official language propagated by the Greek civilization earlier. And Latin was the new incoming language of government, business, and scholarship mandated by Romans who were occupying them. So, you kind of look at it, I should say Hebrew was used by the priests, scribes, and synagogues, so most likely Jesus spoke Aramaic at most times, speaking to the general masses, and perhaps Hebrew, which is also known as Jewish Aramaic, because Aramaic, there was dialects of Aramaic. So we don't know if he spoke Hebrew, or if it was Aramaic, Jewish Aramaic, or, probably all of them. It was, we're in America, we learn one language, but people around the world learn many. I visited someone in Holland, and she knew like 6 languages. Same thing in Poland. And it's like, that was just normal. And I'm like, wow. So he probably spoke Hebrew in the synagogues, or to predominantly Jew, and Greek or Latin to the officials, though the Latin officials knew Greek well, too, because, again, they're the conquering country. Greek was the official language before. The New Testament is written in ancient Greek, which, just for the tally books, has nothing to do with modern Greek. So if you're in Greece and you speak Greek, you may be familiar with the letters, but it's going to hinder you to a degree because they're nothing like them. They don't, the words don't mean the same. They're spoken different. In fact, as an aside, at some point in the world, nobody knew how to read ancient Greek. There was no books. There was no teacher. Nobody knew how to read it. And so when they started to go, when the Latin version of the Bible took over, they had to go back and find the Greek and relearn it. And luckily they had the Rosetta Stone and other things that helped them figure out a lot of it. But some of the words are still a little sketchy, though luckily nothing really important. Excuse me. Give you an example of where it says in the Bible that they were using different languages. Paul, in Acts, give you a quote here. When he was given, when he gave him permission, standing on the stair, he being the official, Paul asked permission. I didn't, I want to record just the pertinent parts. Standing on the stairs, motioned to the people with his hand, and then he said, and then there was a great hush. He spoke to them in the Hebrew dialect, saying, blah, blah, blah. So, but it's recorded in Greek in the New Testament. So he spoke in Hebrew, and yet it was written down in Greek. So the person writing it, Luke was supposedly the author of Acts. Luke was writing it down in either he translated it on the fly to Greek as he wrote it down, or it was worked on later. It was written down in Aramaic or whatever, and then translated officially. It's no one was there to see it. The bottom line is we can see that he was speaking in something, Hebrew or Jewish Aramaic, and it was written down in Greek. I mean, it's not a biggie, but you just got to understand that the people have made decisions throughout the years to get that Bible in your hand. You just want to you want to understand the decisions, and the vast majority of decisions are fine, and but nonetheless, it's there. I bring this up because there are a few times authors and translators did not translate it into Greek, but kept it in Aramaic or Hebrew. I think this might be because there were nuances to the word not adequately conveyed by any word in Greek. Or perhaps the word was rare and not well understood, so kept in as it was to be safe. I kind of think mammon is actually both of these. Here's a couple more examples of multiple languages in the Bible. Remember, we're reading it in English, but it was written in Greek. But even the English translators kept the original Jewish Aramaic that was written. It's kind of fascinating to me. It's like, why would you write it down and you're going to quote Jesus on one hand, but in certain times you quote him literally in the Aramaic language. It's kind of interesting. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, was translated, and it's quoted, then it's got like a parentheses, was translated, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk. That was in Mark 5:41. I have all these notes are available, and the link, you can download the PDF of this stuff. There's another one. In about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Again, it was important enough to literally keep in the original tongue that actually uttered it. So it's possible that in some of these cases, the person who's writing it, which would be, was it Matthew? Or Mark was the other one, or Luke, maybe they were there and heard it, and some of those stuff stuck so well, they just put down, they just heard it, and who knows? Who knows? But my point is, it's not common, but it's not uncommon either that this has been done. So now we get to mammon. The verse, Matthew 6:24, and I'm going to read it from the King James, and I'll explain. No man can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or he else will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Now, the NASB, which I usually use, decided to translate mammon into wealth, which is, as we'll see in the word, it's not that that's bad, but I think it does lose a little bit of the thrust of Jesus' term using mammon, because it's, as I've done my reading, it's not like this common word. It's not like a household common word. It was kind of like you had to figure it out. In fact, there are some studies that are thinking that perhaps there was a local deity who was named Mammon, and I don't see any literal, actual proof of that, but could be, because the way he's saying it, you cannot serve God and mammon. God is a being, and so mammon is a being. And I'll kind of get into how I think that can work out. The NASB decided to translate, okay, and but they did put a footnote. They were compelled to add a footnote. One thing I like about the NASB is when they make some decisions, they'll put a footnote on the bottom so you can see some of the other aspects of it. So the footnote reads Greek mamonas, or the Aramaic mammon, i.e. wealth, etc., personified as an object of worship. So I think what we're doing here, and that's where I started to go off on my thinking, is that what you're looking at is you cannot serve God and this whole apparatus of wealth and power. It's an object of worship. There's another verse I should have included in here, is that the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money, the love of money. It's that attitude that's there, that what are you going to do first? I love when you hear people talk about, I got to be a good steward of God's money, and so you don't do certain things with it. And when it's like, reminds me of the Pharisees who tied dill and cumin, spices, to make sure that they look cool, that they're given 1/10 of everything, except they got excuses for money. Anyway, I would expound on this footnote. Mammon is the personification of one's whole worldview and lifestyle of loving, seeking, and obtaining wealth for obtaining power. I should say accumulating wealth for obtaining power would have sounded better. And prestige, power is prestige, and the exercise of that power. Now, let me read that again, because it's a big boom all in one sentence. Mammon is the personification into one's whole worldview and lifestyle of loving, seeking, and obtaining occurring wealth for obtaining power and prestige and the exercising of that power. It's not just seeking wealth or power. The spirit of mammon is not satisfied with either of wealth or power, or both. It's not satisfied with it. It's a consuming drive for more. And the reward of having is the oppression of others and their exclusion, which also confirms your power and your glory. If everyone had it, it wouldn't be mammonish. It would just be, air. So you have to exclude others and gain extra yourself in order to get that bump. But then you have to continue doing that, because the bump comes when you either oppress someone, exclude them from what you have, or you have more than what they have, and you can wear it or show it and go, here it is. I walk in, people have to say, hello, sir, they move out of the way, or whatever that version of power and prestige is. It's not just acquiring wealth. It is the whole deal of having the power over others, excluding others, and telling people what to do, and having things they can't. And, this is where the whole idea of greed, bragging, coveting, and all this stuff, this is where it all comes from. It's all based on this spirit of mammon, is what I'm calling it, the spirit of mammon. Whether mammon actually be a deity or a demon, or whether it's a synonym for Satan or whatever, that spirit is in the world. And when you start to bite a little bit onto that, well, I'll just do this, I'll do a little bit, it just ravages. Millionaires seek to be billionaires, and the status and the force that it brings. Now there's a race for the first trillionaire. The corporate ladder leads to the CIO and its wealth and power, et cetera, et cetera. It starts as a reasonable, perhaps even a noble goal, which is the gateway for lust and greed. To use the old terms, they're very apropos. As you allow it to grow, it'll eventually take over the driving. You cannot serve your noble goal and mammon. Mammon, again, this concept of power, wealth, power, oppression, and exclusion. You can't have your noble goal and mammon. Let's say you were going to, we're going to build a church. And you want to make it a big fancy church. You're going to have all kinds of stuff. You spend a lot of money on the church. Then you have elders, and you have committee meetings, and you have people who run the committees, and then there's arguments, and beside, everyone is starting to want that position of power. The pastor is now ascends to the top, or priest, or what have you. And and even the Catholic Church, the priest is in the top. It goes all the way up, cardinals, bishops, and the Pope. But all of them have the same problem in all areas, whether it's corporate, what's IBM, or it's a Baptist church, same thing. Whenever you have this vortex of power, you're going to have psychopaths slide into it. And psychopaths are a great example of mammon. How they get to be psychopaths, I'm not going to talk. I don't know here. But nonetheless, it's a great example of it. Here's the spirit of mammon at work today. Why I think I'm drawn to this at this time is because we're seeing colossal results of the spirit of mammon running wild. And I got some bullet points here. The Bolshevistic attacks on the U.S. Constitution. The vicious attacks and lies via media and politicians clearing a path to power in their fantasy of totalitarian rule. Charities being unprecedentedly used to steal money and deprive of those they were created to help. Graft and corruption in government levels are hard to quantify, the billions stolen from taxpayers. The common killing of the unborn being demanded. Not even, just being, it was like you was snuck before, now it's demanded openly. It's bragged about, it's looked forward to, and it's even past the time of live birth. Again, all these things are mammon. If you start out little and you follow that mammon drive, boom, it goes to the end. Human trafficking is being promoted and shielded by those tasked with protecting those trafficked. I mean, House of Human Services, the churches, police, politicians, all these people are trafficking and consuming what's being trafficked of humanity, and they're the ones who would be preventing it. Stock exchanges and banking institutions are unbridled to create and falsify value in transactions, creating a bubble whose breaking will dwarf the fall of Babylon. It is huge. And they just keep, and it's all because of profit buying. It's all because of mammon. The threat of wars and mass oppression abound. I mean, you can go all around the world, everywhere, the stuff's going on. These are all the fruits of the spirit of mammon. but in our own lives, far less glamorous, but just as dangerous of an infection of this spirit of malice. We have to ask ourselves, why am I driven? Why do I need more? What is the end goal of my drive? When is enough? Do I excuse the oppression or the exclusion of others' needs for my own? And then there's the classic phrase, what would Jesus do? Whether it's literally history or a parable of sorts, the Garden of Eden encounter with the serpent is a telling narrative of what we are seeing play out today. Now, I say this, whether it's literal history or a parable of sorts, I say this because if somebody thinks the garden didn't happen as literally done, that's just a story. Play it off. No, if you think that, it's irrelevant to whether it is or not, but the lessons in there are amazingly pertinent. And, of course, if you believe it's literal history, you don't want to fight for it being literal history in as much as learn what is being taught there. That's why I don't even go there. I don't even think about it. That garden encounter with the serpent is a telling narrative, what we are seeing played out today. Now, the garden choices sets the tone and terms. Now, what I've done, it's two chapters, and I tried to pull out little pieces because I'm not interested in everything, just certain parts of it. I mean, I'm not changing the meaning at all. I'm just kind of condensing it to get out a certain, distill it down to one of the points that are contained in here. The Lord planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord caused to grow every tree that is pleasing in the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Let me stop there. Please remember, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, not the tree of knowledge. This is what they use to kind of say, well, God was against people getting out. No, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the experiential understanding of the differences between good and evil. The Lord commanded the man, saying, from any tree in the garden you may eat freely. That's including the tree of life, by the way. But from the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day that you eat from it, you will surely die. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord had made, and said to the woman, surely you will not die, for God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So it's very important to see your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The choice was given to them, as I would paraphrase it, to have an experiential personal knowledge of the difference between good and evil. And led by the lust of power to being like God, there's that spirit of mammon again, they and we are learning the hard way. But in the end, it'll be an eternal lesson. I think we are in the latter days Jesus spoke of, which will be the culmination of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, driven by that very spirit of mammon. Remember, the point about this is once you start on that mammonistic path, there is no stopping. There's no brakes. Well, I'll just do this. Because what will happen is it'll become boring, and you'll want that thrill of moving on farther down the line. And then, I'll just stop here. I'll just stop here. The very obvious bottom line written across the sky in its obviousness. I mean, I guess I should, I've read this without speaking it. It's kind of awkward. The very obvious bottom line written across the sky. Humans cannot serve God, living out his policies, and serve mammon, living out its policies. Not even a little, as a little will always lead to more and ultimately to destruction in all applications. This is why I think the Sermon on the Mount is the most critical work in all of history. All of Jesus' sayings and warnings and guidelines alike. And I have links both underneath this video or audio and the in the PDF where you can read that right online and through BibleGateway.com, or you could just go to BibleGateway.com and type in Sermon on the Mount. There's another account of it in Luke, not as verbose in Matthew, but, just as good. The kingdom of heaven is more valuable than mammon. So I'm looking at the kingdom of heaven is kind of this, it's the goal where we're going to be set up again. New heaven, new earth, under the heavens rules instead of the learning the knowledge between good and evil. Eventually, we're going to learn the knowledge between good and evil, and it's going to be written for all future generations to see. And that's where we're headed at this point. That's where I think the whole end of days, or what do you want to call it, latter days, are leading to. I'm going to read from Jesus' teaching in Matthew. The kingdom of heaven, and this is like the opposite of mammon. Mammon is you do whatever you can, you break all the rules of the kingdom, of laws, decency, to get mammon. And here's the opposite. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid again. And from joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Now, granted that they're using the metaphor of a treasure, but he's selling everything he has to get the treasure. He doesn't go kill somebody. So even if it was going to be a standard treasure, a materialistic treasure, it still doesn't go kill people to get it. He does the legal aspects, they'll go get it. But really, the treasure is for a metaphor for the principles of God. And again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls. And upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold everything he had to buy it. Again, the opposite of mammon. We're getting rid of material wealth and power in order to achieve the principles of God as laid out in the coming kingdom. The warnings. All right, here's some quotes here I really think are applicable. I mean, again, Jesus' teaching is fantastic. The whole idea of mammon, this whole spirit to get you to go for materialistic greed for power and wealth, because wealth gets power. And then in order to enjoy that wealth and power, you have to exert it upon somebody, which means you have to push people around. You have to prevent others from getting what they could get or what have you, and to have it be exclusive for you. What value would be, Lamborghini if everyone had one? That's why it's so expensive. It's not worth it. It's not like they're working on a 1% profit margin because of the workmanship in it. It's because it's exclusive. And if I can buy a Lamborghini, that means I have done something. It's ridiculous because, I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's a parable. Jesus told him a parable saying, a man of a land. All right. I'm sorry. Dyslexic here, but he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man was very productive. And he began to reason with himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many, many goods laid up for many years to come. Take ease, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. There's a guy, going the mammon path, and it's showing what it'll be worth to him personally. Another quote that comes to me, it's a warning of people not doing the right thing. If you don't get it, if you don't get it, you're not doing it. It's not like God's going to punish you personally, like, I'm going to throw this lighting bolt at you. It's a self-fulfillingness. God is warning, don't go down the mammon path, because going down it, it's its own demise. Do not store. Oh, I read that already. Oh, no, I didn't. But the one who has heard and has not acted accordingly is like a man who built a house on the ground without any foundation, and the torrent burst against it and immediately collapsed, and the ruin of that house was great. You're building yourself on mammon, and that power there, it's always going to fall apart. But look what's going on right now in the political realm. We have a big battle right now, and those people out there are fighting on the left. Are fighting for their lives, their power, their mammon. They're fighting for their mammon. They could lose it. You take some of these guys off TV, what are they going to do? No, I like to be on TV. I'm special. I'm someone. People know me. I get money. I get fame. I get power. I will do whatever it takes. Well, you better read these false things or follow this thing. I'm in, and it works for the other side, too. That's why I get a little aggravated with people like Sean Hannity and Alex Jones, because they color it with all of this ego stuff. Anyway, do not store yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be there also. That is, you can't serve God and Mammon. You will despise one or love the other. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, your passions. There will be your drive. Where's your treasure? Is it in heaven? Your drive will be toward heavenly things. Is your treasure in, having the biggest brandest new 8K TV? Well, that's where your heart will be, and you will do what it takes to get that in lieu of or in sacrifice of things that perhaps you should do. The lamp is the eye of the body. So when your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? The lamp of your body, the goal, where's your treasure? Are you serving God or Mammon? If your eye is clear, if you're deceived, if you're on the right track, your whole body will be full of light. If you're following the principles and doing it, it'll be good for you. If your eye is bad, means you're deceived, you're running on different principles, your body will be filled with darkness because it won't be focused on the light. When that light, when your inspiration, your reason, your motivation is darkness, how great will be the darkness in you? It's pretty sobering stuff. That's why a lot of people I don't think like to read Jesus, because it's like bing bang right there. But it's good because it's actually good for how you can learn these principles. And it's really important now. I think the Mammon thing is really important because the whole world is geared on this. Not I'm talking about like one person in the paddy fields of Taiwan or Thailand. I'm not. I'm not. These are people in power, and power is in many forms. It could be in a family. It could be a patriarch or matriarch causing grief to the family. It's the point is that if your goal is power, and to prove you have power, you have to wield it. And money is a way to get power, and money is a way of wielding power. That's going to be your goal, and you will then harm a lot of people. You can kill thousands or millions in wars. Or you can just simply harm one. It's all relative because it's given more power and given more position, you can do more harm with the Mammon aspect of it. And a lot of people are born into a family with money. And another quote that Jesus said is, it's easier for a rich man to go through an eye in a camel than for a rich man to get in the kingdom of heaven. And the response was, well, who could be saved? And it says, with all things, with God, man it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. So when these people are born into rich families, it's bad for them because they're taught both in the training of their of their personhood and mind, they're taught to follow the ways of mammon. And they exert it and so forth, and they get in trouble. I mean, look what's going on with Hunter Biden now, all that stuff that he's gone into. So, I mean, to me, this is why I look out into the world and say, these are the latter days. This is the revelation. This is the apocalypse, which the apocalypse means to reveal. And, of course, revelation is a revealing. And right now what's being revealed is the hearts of people. Are they serving God or mammon? And it will be a surprising thing because some people who are nice, no problems and all that, when it actually comes out, the bottom line, the rubber hits the road, as the phrase goes, they serve mammon. It just so happens that their serving mammon hasn't been detrimental to you. And now, because they are on the mammon path, that energy, it's almost like there's a gravity pulling down the sled. If your sled is going downward, it's going to go down faster and worse because you've been on that path. And if you're going upward, you will be tried to pull downward because as the people go down, they want to take you with them. So it's not going to be a pleasant time. And there's a lot of people who say, well, Jesus is coming and rapture us away. Well, maybe I'll do that in another show, but I'm not a big believer in the rapture, pre-tribulation millennialist, as they say. I'd be more than happy if it happens, okay? But in history, the pressure of history is shown that the people who are the righteous for God get really, messed up. And it does say, though, that eventually God will step in because unless all flesh should be destroyed. So, we'll step in. I just don't think it's going to happen that way. And this is why I think people should prepare this way rather than just kick back and relax, do nothing, and figure, well, I'll be just yanked out of here any time. Again, if you are, great. If not, now what? This is why I don't like the whole Q thing, QAnon. Because things have already changed here and there over the years of Q. But if it doesn't happen the way they're saying, and you're all kicking back, relax, it's all in, it's all over, it's going to happen, it's done, it's just a question of time. And it doesn't happen, then what? Me, if it does happen, I can be happy. If it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be blindsided. Of course, one might ask, well, what are you going to do? I don't know, but I'm not going to be, there's a big cognitive dissonance that causes problems. And when you get hit by cognitive dissonance, hardly you can go crazy. Look what's going on with the people they said Trump was going to lose, and he was the Antichrist, right? He won, and they're like, oh, my God, what's going to happen? Boom. They got hit by this, and they developed a huge case of cognitive dissonance. And it could have actually pushed them to crazy land. And then, you got the people in Hollywood and whatnot, famous people on TV and the news and all. They're on the mammon path, and now there could be an inner, that spirit of mammon knows that his time is limited. I think I read last time Revelations where the dragon, that old dragon, the devil and Satan was cast down to the earth, bringing his wrath, woe to the earth, for his time is short. So, again, this is why I could think it's also mammon's popping up, because you might have, I don't know how it works up in the actual physics part of it, but you have Satan and his angels are on earth. I don't know what that means. They're more physically present. They have more of a energetic action now than where they were before. I don't know. And rather than splitting hairs to try and find out those details, I'll just take the bottom line. I'll just take the principle. I don't have to know how it is. I just say, okay, it makes sense because everyone's going nuts everywhere. I mean, acts of evil have happened forever. I mean, let's, look at Caligula. Look at the slaughtering conquerors and lead tips. And, look, throughout time, there's always been evil. It's just that it's, and Jesus warns in the when the later days are done, he says, well, there'll be earthquakes in diverse places, etc. These things all have to happen. They're all kind of common. To me, what makes is not these things happening, is the way they're happening all at once. We're aware of them globally, and the levels of them are really high. And now I just heard Bernie Sanders, with my own ears, saying about how in you got 9 or 10 years, there'll be cities completely underwater. Well, if you want to look at Venice, something you got to think about too is that if you're on an island, you could sink as well. I mean, the water doesn't have to rise; the ground could go sink and go down. Whether you want to use the Atlantis aspects, but you could see in the ocean where there's been things that have sunk. So it's not the political global warming or the climate change in as much as the ground could be sinking. But, here he is, 9, 10 years, we're going to have cities underwater. Oh, my God. You have to vote for me and do exactly what I say, give away your power and do everything you say. Okay. Oh, I don't want that to happen. How in the world, if Congress and the presidency and all these things can't solve some of these issues that have been around for decades, how are they going to solve the world destroying? And they have to get it done soon because, the worse it is, the worse it is. The mind is like, what? It's ridiculous. And yet the science is being waved around. But this is what's going to happen in a time. The lies will be so great, you won't be able to know. If the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing it play out all the way from Garden of Eden to now, all of it being played out. Jesus warned about it. That's why Jesus was the guy who came to teach, set things right, to interpret the misinterpreted, to reveal truths. I mean, that was the teaching part of his mission, and that's what I'm focusing on. Because if you understand these things and heed the advice, God works inside you. And instead of the spirit of mammon bringing you down, and bringing you faster to destruction, the Spirit of God works in you, bringing you up, closer. I think of something with the Spirit of Mammon. I think it's a very good phrase for what's going on today. I mean, I'm old enough that I can go back. I mean, actually, if you look back 10 years, this stuff wouldn't have any legs, but I'm old to realize how ridiculous what they're being saying on news. News would never assault and be this aggressive and say things that are wrong and lie. Never. And now it's rampant everywhere. I mean, it's like the dam bust. And now, if you get worse or you progress down this line of mammon, at some point, it's hard to overdo yourself. It's like the movies. How could you make more movies? Well, you start remaking older ones. New special effects. Now you have new cultural programming in them, and you're poo-pooing the old ones. You can't watch those because they were racist or whatever. So now you have to watch the new one. And, of course, you go watch the movie, you buy it. This is all part of the programming. All about harvesting you for your energy in terms of what you can work for or, what value you have. In this case, your value is a vote to keep them in power. If you are working and making money, good, we're going to tax it. We're going to take it away. We're going to drive you with the spirit of mammon to buy the bigger TV. Your eyes can't even see a 4K, let alone 8K TV. I mean, I again, being old enough, I'm watching a TV, a tube, couldn't even get the color right, hardly. It was like a great thing, and then the reception and all this stuff. And now I'm looking at I got in our house, I think we got a HD, we got an HD flat screen, but it's smaller. It's like, I can't imagine a picture any better than that. In fact, there's in the studio, I have a TV that was given to me by a friend. Come over and watch movies and stuff. It's a present, and it's a big TV. And I noticed it's the 1920 by 1080 or whatever. So when I watch movies, it's the resolution is so high that you can actually see the flaw in the film of the older movies. It's like, well, and now, of course, they're filming in 4K and 8K, and they're doing it. So it's like, how, it's not a realistic, it's not like, oh, wow, that's going to be that much better. It's just there so that someone can go out and buy a new TV. It's a selling point. It's a marketing point. Hey, we're doing this stuff. There's the mammon going. How good is good? When is enough enough? Keeps telling you. I mean, I do it myself with the equipment and so on. I got some equipment that's pretty old, but it works, and it's enough. I'm talking into a mic. There's people who do it like with a laptop, but I want to do it a certain amount of quality level, and enough is enough. My mic I bought it in like 97, but it works fine. In fact, I have another mic that I got back in the 80s, and it still works. SM57, it still works good. So, when is enough enough? And because of our business model, too, you have to go out and buy a new car. Well, we could, you got to talk you into buying it. Well, it's got better gas mileage. It has this gimmick. It has that gimmick. Because now they built the cars so well that they last longer. Back in the 70s, you get 100,000 miles in a car, great. Now it's 100,000. It's like, yeah, so I got 300,000 in my car. And not me, but someone. So I don't drive that much in my car, so I have very little miles per year. So that's what it comes down to. When you need to have more just to have more, when you need to tell somebody what to do or prevent them from doing something just to feel good about doing it, the red flags are like flying all over the place. And people, wow, I'm not going to do that. Well, everyone, this is why Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. You have to constantly examine yourself because the spirit of mammon is tugging at you little by little. Get you to do this, get you to do that. Well, that's okay. You deserve it. Hey, you deserve it. You work hard. And I'm not saying someone doesn't, or I'm not saying they don't work hard, but what's the it that you want to get? So anyway, I think I'll leave it at that. I'll just start rambling on, and people will be tuning off anyway. I do want to bring up the BitChute channel. It's bitchute.com/ I think it's bitchute.com/channel/F2F, because in December, YouTube is going to start deleting accounts that they deem they can't make money at, not profitable, which, since most of my stuff can't even be monetized because of the, they deem that the content is unsuitable. So, I'm looking for the day that'll be gone, but I have a setup now that automatically uploads from YouTube to BitChute. So you might want to go there and get an account. It's free. I'd recommend giving something to them a little bit because they're fighting against YouTube. Multiple giga billion dollar, YouTube. Also, I want to mention the same thing with Facebook. They're getting very aggressive. I've been respectful, but I've not been quiet about bringing up and pointing out the problems. So I want to mention that Gab.com I think is a good combo of, like, it's a Twitter replacement, which another one Twitter is doing. They're now not going to allow any political advertising, which, years ago I'd love it, but now what they're doing is they're trying to keep conservative stuff from contaminating the voting pool, or the Christian stuff from contaminating the voting pool. So Gab.com, I'm on there. It's F2F, the number 2, F2F. That's what, every time I say anything to do with F2F, it's always the number 2. And you can find me on Gab on there, because eventually YouTube, Facebook may dump. I've never been dumped yet. A couple of times I've been questioned, but again, it's not because I do anything graphic or crazy. I just state, critically thought truth, and or I go against the grain on certain things, and that could be problematic. And then Spreaker seems to be the main place I'm doing it now. I upload the show on Spreaker. It goes to YouTube. It goes to BitChute. But no problems with Spreaker at this point. And that's just audio, which is what I'm doing now, because there's really not a need to do video. I'll do it when I need it. But all of those can use your support, and as well as, I wouldn't mind it, because that'd be nice. Patreon, and all these things are set up. So if you're interested in doing that, for either of those individual places or for me, you can find it on their pages and mine. So I don't push it, I don't harp on it. I'll be doing this as long as I can do it. And reminding you also, there's a Google Drive, at least while I do have Google Drive, that will have the printed out, the written versions of this. I may do a little rewrite on a couple of words now that I read it. But that is downloadable as well, and will be in the links below that will have back about this. And if you find it worth something and help you, good. Let me know what you think. I've gotten some good responses so far. It's nice. It's not a big volume of people, but I got to expect that. I don't necessarily draw them on my charm. I don't perform what's that, performance news where I scream and yell and get mad and do all kinds of things that are entertaining. But I do bring out what I can, and people can take it for what it's worth. So God bless, and I will see you soon. God loves you. And like that there, as Kojak would say.
My old friend, the one who walked before, the one who walk again, the ancient one of old, with wisdom for the new. Revive our inner sight, retell your timeless truths. Oh, ancient one. Hey!
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the ONSIG radio network of stations.